Hello everyone, I am Ariel Sobrevilla, your philosophy teacher for this semester. So today we will have a walkthrough and deepening of the second module, lesson 3 of the Introduction to the Philosophy of the Human Person, which was developed and approved by the Division of Bataan and is officially used among the public senior high schools in the division. We will be guided by the most essential learning competencies of the course. So the content standard for this module focuses on the ways of doing philosophy. Specifically, the MELCs to be covered are the following. Number 1, distinguish opinion from truth. Number 2, realize that methods of philosophy leads to wisdom and truth. And number 3, evaluate truth from opinions in different situations using the methods of philosophizing. Our video lessons will have 2 segments. So the first one will cover the MELCs 1 and 2, and the second one will cover the third MELC. The objective of this video lesson is primarily to help you understand the contents of the lesson and eventually guide you in answering the activities and assessment of the modules. So if you're ready, let's begin. Let's begin with this one. Have you ever had a dream that you are so convinced that everything you were dreaming about is true? Well, I would guess most of you would say yes. In fact, some of you would even say, oo nga no, akala ko nga kami na, panaginip lang pala. Some of you minsan manghihinayang pa, sayang. Well, to those of you out there watching, are you really sure that you are not dreaming at this very moment? Ito bang nangyayari sa mundo natin ngayon? Halimbawa, itong pandemic na ito ay isang napakahabang panaginip lamang. How would I know then what is real and what is not? Kasi baka mamaya tayo nananaginip lang. Baka ikaw na nakikinig sa akin ngayon, nanonood ngayon, ay nananaginip lang, gumising ka. Tapikin mo yung katabi mo, kurutin mo yung sarili mo para malaman kung ikaw ba ay gising o hindi gising o yung nangyayari o ginagawa mo ay totoo o hindi totoo. Well, let us get into the minds of the great philosophers of time, Plato and Aristotle in particular, of course, not to mention Socrates. It was Plato who first gave us the concept of what he called the ideal world, or often referred to as the world of ideas, or sometimes the world of forms, from which according to him all perfections are derived. We often hear the words, bakit ba hindi tayo perpekto? Bakit ikaw pinanganak na gwapo, ako mas gwapo? Ganun ba? Or look at the things around you. You see that everything in this world is full of imperfections. In fact, madalas nga nating sinasabi, wala namang perpekto sa mundo, hindi ba? Pero ang tanong, bakit? For this lesson, we will first try to see how Plato visualized and explained the concepts of truth, in which in one way or another, he associated it with wisdom and ignorance, in which for him, the opposite of truth, through his very famous myth or allegory of the cave. So here's the story.
What is reality? Knowledge? The meaning of life? Big topics you might tackle figuratively, explaining existence as a journey down a road or across an ocean, a climb, a war, a book, a thread, a game, a window of opportunity, or an all too short-lived flicker of flame. 2,400 years ago, One of history's most famous thinkers said life is like being chained up in a cave, forced to watch shadows flitting across a stone wall. Pretty cheery, right? That's actually what Plato suggested in his Allegory of the Cave, found in Book 7 of the Republic, in which the Greek philosopher envisioned the ideal society by examining concepts like justice, truth, and beauty. In the allegory, a group of prisoners have been confined in a cavern since birth with no knowledge of the outside world. They are chained facing a wall, unable to turn their heads, while a fire behind them gives off a faint light. Occasionally, people pass by the fire carrying figures of animals and other objects that cast shadows on the wall. The prisoners name and classify these illusions, believing they're perceiving actual entities. Suddenly, one prisoner is freed and brought outside for the first time. The sunlight hurts his eyes, and he finds the new environment disorienting. When told that the things around him are real, while the shadows were mere reflections, he cannot believe it. The shadows appeared much clearer to him, but gradually his eyes adjust until he can look at reflections in the water, at objects directly, and finally at the sun, whose light is the ultimate source of everything he has seen. The prisoner returns to the cave to share his discovery, but he is no longer used to the darkness and has a hard time seeing the shadows on the wall. The other prisoners think the journey has made him stupid and blind, and violently resist any attempts to free them. Plato introduces this passage as an analogy of what it's like to be a philosopher trying to educate the public. Most people are not just comfortable in their ignorance, but hostile to anyone who points it out. In fact, the real-life Socrates was sentenced to death by the Athenian government for disrupting the social order, and his student Plato spends much of the Republic disparaging Athenian democracy, while promoting rule by philosopher kings. With the cave parable, Plato may be arguing that the masses are too stubborn and ignorant to govern themselves. But the allegory has captured imaginations for 2,400 years because it can be read in far more ways. Importantly, the allegory is connected to the theory of forms developed in Plato's other dialogues, which holds that, like the shadows on the wall, things in the physical world are flawed reflections of ideal forms, such as roundness or beauty. In this way, the cave leads to many fundamental questions, including the origin of knowledge, the problem of representation, and the nature of reality itself. For theologians, the ideal forms exist in the mind of a creator. For philosophers of language viewing the forms as linguistic concepts, the theory illustrates the problem of grouping concrete things under abstract terms. And others still wonder whether we can really know that the things outside the cave are any more real than the shadows. As we go about our lives, can we be confident in what we think we know? Perhaps one day a glimmer of light may punch a hole in your most basic assumptions. Will you break free to struggle towards the light, even if it costs you your friends and family? Or stick with comfortable and familiar illusions? Truth or habit? Light or shadow? Hard choices, but if it's any consolation, you're not alone. There are lots of us down here.
Now, let us try to decode the story. A while back, if you can recall it correctly, I have asked you about the seeming reality of our dream experiences and even asked you, how do we know what is real and what is not? Remember? Well, according to Plato, everything that we see around us, including our experiences with these things, are actually not real. They are simply manifestations or reflections of what he called the ideal world. Just like the experience of the man who was able to escape from the cave, if you can recall the story. At first, he was doubtful about his newfound reality, since along with the other prisoners in the cave, they have never experienced the actual and real world, but only the shadows, which they got used to it, and thereby they considered it as real. Now in the story, when the enlightened prisoner came back to the cave to tell the other prisoner about his newfound reality, he was actually not accepted, ridiculed by them. Why do you think so? Well, because they got used to the shadows. And these shadows for them are the reality. Now, let me ask all of you again, listening and watching right now. Do you think you're real? Are you real? Are all the things that you got used to know ever since you were a child really real? Now, the question about reality will eventually direct us to the question about the truth. Why? Because truth is basically founded on reality. Therefore, we can say that whatever is real is also at the same time truth. For some of you who found out later, for example, in your life, that there is really no such person or thing like Santa Claus putting in coins in your pocket or putting in coins in your socks during Christmas time or sneaking at midnight to give you Christmas presents, how did you feel about it? How would you feel if something that you hold true and real happened to be not true or real in the end? Akala ko mahal niya ako, hindi naman pala. Sometimes this point of enlightenment is easy to accept, but oftentimes it is not. So how do I know the truth based on the thoughts of Plato? Okay, so here's a little exercise for you. I'd like you to get a piece of paper to write onto. Okay? So any piece of paper will do. Now, in 20 seconds, I would like you to draw a dog, aso. No? Are you ready? 20 seconds starts now. Time's up. I'd like you now to look at your drawings. Are you happy with it? Are you satisfied with your drawings? Of course, I would bet some of you who were good at drawings will say, "Yes sir, ganda ng drawing ko, oh. Tignan mo sir, oh." But, how about those who were not so good? Yung iba malamang mahihiya. Sabihin, "Sir, wag na lang, ang pangit ng drawing ko." Now, here's the part where our philosopher Plato will come to the scene. Plato will ask you this series of questions. Are you ready? Question number 1, he would say, when you were asked to draw a dog, did you have an idea of a dog? I bet you would say, yes sir. Question number 2, he would ask you this. Now, did you draw a dog based on your idea of a dog? Again, I would bet you will say, come on sir, that's common sense of course. Paano ko magdodrawing ng aso nang hindi muna ako nagkaroon ng idea ng isang aso? And finally, he will ask you this question. Which do you think is perfect? Your drawing of a dog or your idea of a dog? Now, that's what Plato meant by the perfect world of ideas, or sometimes he called it the perfect world of forms. Truth for Plato, therefore, is grounded on the eternal world of forms or ideas, which is perfect according to him. This world is perfect, and our world, the physical world that we see here, are just copies, reflections, shadows, or you call drawings of the world of ideas. And thereby, ito yung dahilan bakit natin sinasabi na ang mundong ito ay full of imperfections. Why? Because they are simply copies of the world of ideas. Okay? Well, ladies and gentlemen, this is the mind of Plato, the rationalist philosopher who puts high regard on human reason as the primary source of human knowledge. Now, for your assignment, I would like you to answer this activity. The title of the activity is My Personal Cave Experience, a Critique of My Own Belief. And here's the procedure. Have you ever realized that it's quite easy for us to find faults of others and criticize them? Well, Plato will be asking you this time to do a sort of self-examination. Here are the things that you will do. First, I would like you to examine all your personal beliefs. Second, if you are going to criticize just one of your beliefs, which among them will you be criticizing? And lastly, what are your doubts about that particular belief? List them down. That's it for now, guys. So on our next video lesson, I will be discussing and explaining to you how Aristotle sees reality and truth. But just to give you a glimpse of it, well, Aristotle exclaimed that his teacher Plato is actually dreaming and he needs to wake up. In fact, Aristotle, known to be as the great organizer, a logician, a scientist, and an empiricist, believes that reality is what you actually see, feel, touch, or in short, perceive and experience. With that, see you again. Bye.
I am the gadfly sent by the gods to sting the horse into action. All day long, in all places, I am fastening upon you, arousing, persuading, and reproaching you. I thought, well, neither of us knows anything really beautiful or profound, but at least I am better off than this fellow, because he knows nothing and thinks he knows everything, while I know nothing.